I mean, it's absolutely great. It's having this database of all the applicants that all the colleges can see, because college choice, there's always a worry of, if I choose a college that looks really pretty or is really big or is really famous, what if I'm more likely to go in if I go to a different college that might have less applicants? But all of that kind of stuff really goes out the window when you discover the pools and realise that all of the colleges can see all of the applicants and make sure that the best students, the students that deserve an offer, will receive an offer. All right, so hello everyone, welcome to Cambridge from the Inside for another episode, our second episode on frequently asked questions for admissions. My name is Siam and I am the Outreach Communications Officer for Trinity Hall, and I'm here with Marcus.
So I'm Marcus Tomlin. I'm the Director of Admissions here at Trinity Hall, which just means I oversee all aspects of the admissions process. So in theory, at least, I should know something about some of the topics we'll be talking about today. Let's see if that's true or not.
Yeah, exactly. And today we're going to be doing our second part of our FAQs, frequently asked questions on admissions. So there's a part one to this like episode series. So if you haven't watched that, feel free to watch that beforehand. And we're just leading off from the last part with the next remaining questions that we have. So Marcus, easy question to start off with. How do I know if I'm good enough for Cambridge?
Yeah, it's something we often get asked at open days and things like that. I think the honest answer is you can't know for absolute certain that you're, a student who's well suited for Cambridge. I think there are some things that can give you a strong indication as to whether that's the case or not. So we always encourage people to undertake, super curricular work, to read and study beyond their school syllabus. And I think if you've done some of that, and if you've actually really enjoyed doing it, genuinely enjoyed doing it, then that's probably a pretty good indication that you're the sort of student who's likely to flourish at a place like Cambridge. And obviously, if you've enjoyed all the work that you've done at school, if you've enjoyed the work that you've covered for your A-levels or your IB exams, whatever you're doing, that again is a good indication. Obviously, if you don't really like studying, if you don't really like learning, if you don't really like finding out new things about particular topics, then it probably means that university perhaps isn't right for you, and Cambridge probably isn't right for you. So I think, if you're naturally curious, enjoy finding stuff out, that probably gives you an indication that you're the kind of person that we're looking for. But you don't really know until you apply. And so I'd always encourage people to apply. What I often say to people is you have far more chance of receiving an offer if you choose to apply than if you don't. Because if you choose not to apply, the chance of getting an offer is literally zero. Yeah. But you've taken the decision yourself that you're not the right kind of student for Cambridge. Whereas if you apply, it's for us to try and make sure we make a good decision about that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that I really took from what you said was if you find yourself that you're quite naturally curious, or you're curious about certain things or a certain subject, I would really take a deep dive into that curiosity and see where it takes you. I think you exploring things that you're interested about and reading above what you learn in school, not because we're telling you to for supercurricular activities or because to appear impressive amongst in your classroom, but really looking into things that you find interesting because you find them interesting. Takes you a really long way. In general with your own curiosities, but then you come to a point where you look at the certain degree courses that Cambridge offers and university offers, and you look at the course outline across the years, and if you find yourself in a position, I'd really want to learn about these kind of things, these are the kind of things I'm looking into at the moment, and the opportunity to be taught by world-leading academics on these topics that you find interesting would be a dream, then you know that you're making the right steps.
Yep.
With applying for Cambridge. We always get a question, Marcus, from sixth formers, year 12 students who say that for whatever reason their GCSEs didn't go as well as they thought they would, or their GCSEs don't reflect on, or they don't feel like it reflects on their academic ability, that they believe that they could thrive in Cambridge, but they just don't have the right grades, the right paperwork. In those situations, what is it that those students can do in order to kind of have a chance with Cambridge? Because I think I've always, in those instances, kind of seen that they could, in terms of to improve their paperwork, improve what their grades are on paper, apply post A-level.
Yeah, applying post A-level is always an option. And of course, when people do that, it does change things a little bit, because it means that if we are really impressed by their application, they don't receive a conditional offer, because obviously they've already got their A-level grades. So they would just receive an unconditional offer. So in other words, assuming they choose to accept our offer, then it's just automatic that they join us. So that's a completely valid route, and it's never the majority of people who apply post-qualification, as we call it. That's the kind of jargon. It's never the majority of people, but there's always a significant minority who do. And they're assessed in the same way. I mean, it's not as if we have, sort of extra tasks for people who apply that way. They just apply and in the usual way, and are assessed in the usual way. But as I say, it does mean that when we're making our decision, we can see what they've achieved in their A-levels or their IB or whatever, and we can say, well, okay, if we choose to offer to this person, then they'll almost certainly join us, because, as I say, the only reason they wouldn't join us is if they subsequently chose that they didn't want to, which is fine, that can be a good route. And you mentioned things like GCSE performance. I mean, it's not unusual for us to see people applying with, let's say, kind of patchy GCSEs. They've done okay, but they haven't done amazingly. They haven't just aced everything in their GCSEs, and that's not necessarily a deal breaker for us. We tend to be looking for people who are on an upward trajectory, and there's all sorts of reasons why people might underperform at the GCSE stage. So in some cases, people just haven't become interested in their subject by then, so they're coasting a bit at GCSE. They're not really like trying particularly hard, or they are interested in their subjects and they just find the GCSE stage a bit boring. And then they really get engaged and excited and sort of committed at the subsequent stage, whether that's A-level or IB or Scottish Highers or whatever. We're often looking for people who seem to be sort of going up and up and up and up in terms of their achievement, rather than people who aced everything at GCSE and then have struggled ever since. Because, we want to make offers to students who we can help to develop further. As a university, we'd like to kind of add value to those students. I wouldn't be nervous about applying with a slightly patchy GCSE record. Some of the students who receive offers and then come here and go on to achieve the best possible results here do come from an academic background where the GCSEs weren't absolutely stellar.
I guess a student is in a tricky situation where they don't have the best GCSEs, and then that affects the predicted grades that their teachers give them. And I think if a student has a set of predicted grades that is far below what the entry requirements are, but they believe that they can achieve the entry requirements, then it's quite a niche scenario. But we hear a lot of students talk about it quite often. If in those situations where the predicted grades is far below the entry requirement, by all means the student can achieve the entry requirements through actually get the grades with the A-levels, and by all means apply post A-level, because if you have if you don't have the best GCSEs and you didn't have the best predicted grades, but you have the A-level grades, that kind of overwrites any of the paperwork.
Absolutely, beforehand. Yeah. And I mean, we do receive predicted grades from the schools that our applicants are at, at the point when they apply. And predicted grades are helpful in some respects. I mean, to be honest about this, we know that some schools are slightly optimistic in their predictions, and we also know that some schools are slightly pessimistic in their predictions. So it's really hard to treat the predicted grades as being a 100% reliable source of information. But obviously, if someone has subsequently gone on to obtain their A-level results or their IB results or whatever, then that is 100% reliable. If someone's got 2 A stars and an A in their A-levels, that's just a fact. That's something that's concrete. That's something that we can factor into our decision making with a considerable degree of confidence. Whereas a predicted grade, even if it's very eye-catching, someone might be predicted 3 A stars, it doesn't necessarily mean that person will go on to obtain 3 A stars. It's a prediction. And so, it can make a difference if the actual exam results are kind of already in the bag, because from our perspective, it eliminates some of the uncertainty.
But it sounds like from what you're saying that for all sorts of reasons, even if your predicted grades aren't great and your GCSE grades aren't great either, a student still should try and apply. And especially with something like the August Reconsideration pool, which we're going to go into more detail later, if said student were to meet the entry requirements, there are systems in place to reconsider them, and they might be considered to be given an offer because of their other parts of their paperwork, like their admissions assessments and interviews, which is a good point. If you score really highly on the admissions assessment, that is going to be a piece of information that's going to be considered alongside your predicted grades, your grades, and similarly with the interview.
Exactly. And I think it's also worth mentioning that people can reapply, because sometimes people don't, they're not aware that they can. So in other words, if you apply maybe with slightly patchy GCSEs, maybe with slightly low school predictions, and then if you're unsuccessful, you can choose to reapply the following year when you will have your A-level results or your IB results or whatever. And if they're obviously very, very sort of convincing results, it maybe puts you in a much stronger position that year, because we're not relying on the predictions and stuff like that. And you're so far removed from the GCSEs that the GCSE performance is not a particularly significant factor when someone's already got their A-levels or their IB results. So people can apply more than once. And again, just worth saying that, because sometimes people are surprised that that's the case.
Yeah, exactly. Right, so the next question that we have is, so people understand that the University of Cambridge is made up of 29 colleges, and you can do an open application, which is where you're assigned to a random college, or you can apply to a specific college. Question here is, do individual colleges, do they assess applicants differently, or do all of the colleges under the University of Cambridge assess the applicants in the same way?
Broadly speaking, they assess them in pretty much the same way. So the process is the same at each of the colleges, like the sort of main steps of it and the timing of it is the same. And the core information that's available to the people assessing the applications at all the colleges is basically the same. The reason I'm saying, that's sort of generally the case is because the colleges are free to deviate from the standard pattern a little bit if they want to. So there might be some colleges who ask applicants to take an admissions test for a particular subject, and not every college will ask the applicants to take that test. So I think when people have made a decision about the course they want to study, and when they're thinking about which college to apply for, spending a little bit of time to see whether, a particular college requires you to take an additional test for that subject, or whether a particular college doesn't require that. That's the sort of thing that might have an impact on the college choice if you do choose a college when you apply. And again, there are two ways of looking at something like that. Some applicants might think, well, I don't want to take another test, so I'm not going to apply to a college that makes me sit another test. Whereas another applicant might think, well, that gives me yet another opportunity to demonstrate my ability and to show them how good I am. So that might be a reason for choosing to apply to a college that requires you to take the test. So, as I say, at a high level, the basic steps and everything are essentially the same, but there are some relatively small-scale differences like that, and all the information is on the web pages, so there's nothing here that's hidden. It's just worth making people aware that there might be some slight differences between the ways in which the colleges assess the applications for particular subjects.
Yeah, I think if when you're choosing a college, and once you've chosen a college or one or two or three that you've shortlisted, at that point it's definitely worth checking the entry requirements on the college's website and just comparing with the university one. I don't think any of us would expect an applicant to look at all 29 colleges' websites for their entry criteria. But once I'm not sure if I did when I was applying, but that doesn't say too much. Kind of chose my college on a bit of a whim, and I had a phenomenal time, which is something to be said. Made friends for life. But once you do choose a college, it's worth checking their website, because I guess this is the next question, for what kind of differences Trinity Hall has assessing the applicants. I believe there isn't too many differences between other colleges, but there is one for the economics, which is
So again, we as a college we try to sort of follow the general pattern as much as possible, because we just think it's easier for applicants. The fewer differences there are. But for us as a college, for economics, we recognise that economics is one of those courses that kind of sits right in the middle of kind of the sciences and maybe the social sciences, or something a bit more on the sort of arts and humanities end of the spectrum. So you need really good mathematical skills to cope with the economics course, but you also need to be able to write essays. And it just tends to be the case that the people who are really, really, really good at writing essays aren't always particularly brilliant at mathematics, and the people who are brilliant at mathematics aren't always particularly good at writing essays. Whereas economics requires both those skills. And so for us, people who apply for economics need to be taking an A-level or an equivalent in an essay-based subject. So in other words, if someone applies to us and they're just doing sort of, doing, say, maths, further maths, physics and chemistry or something like that, they would be at a strong disadvantage for economics, because we'd prefer to see someone applying with sort of, maths, further maths, physics and history, or something like that, something where we know they've had a lot of experience of writing essays, in addition to having really sharp and impressive mathematical skills. So that's just one example, really, of how this college, Trinity Hall, as a college, differs very slightly, I would say, from the kind of standard pattern. But that's the motivation for it. That's why we do it, because we know that the students who come here to study economics thrive and flourish and cope with the course much more easily if they have both good mathematical skills and good essay writing skills. So we add that extra, I guess, requirement just to make sure that the students who come here really enjoy it and can demonstrate their full ability.
And it's so, like, if you're one of those students who has a writing based A-level, like a essay based A-level, as well as maths and applying for economics, this is a college that's specifically looking for that. But then there are other colleges for economics again, specifically require further maths, which tailors towards a different group of students who might not have write an essay-based A-level, but do have further maths or wanting to apply to economics. And then those colleges that are specifically requiring further maths really tailors towards what they have to offer. So which is why we would recommend to look at the college website. And once you've chosen a college...
you don't want to find out something like that after you've applied.
No.
It's good to just be absolutely certain and then apply in full knowledge. Don't think, I hadn't realised that was the case, because that's just, unfortunate.
That is, yeah, exactly. So the next question I've got here is something that we are going to release a podcast on, so you don't need to talk about it too much. But top tips for writing a personal statement.
Yeah, personal statements. Top tips. What I would say is don't overthink the personal statement. People seem to spend like months and months and months, drafting and redrafting and redrafting and redrafting. I don't think you need to do that. It just needs to give us a sort of brief, honest insight into your interest in the subject you're applying for. Ideally, it will say something about the supercurricular work that you've done, the kind of studies that you've done outside of your schoolwork to deepen your understanding of the subject. There's a really quite severe character limit for the personal statement. It's 4,000 characters, so about 500, 600 words. So you have to be really selective. So I think just don't try and talk about everything that you've done and everything that you're interested in. Be very, very selective and pick maybe 2 or 3 things that you can talk about in some detail and really demonstrate your interest. Don't just assert your interest. Show us that you're interested. And I think my final piece of advice would be don't use the word passion. People use the word passion too many times in the personal statements. We assume you're passionate about your subject. So you don't need to assert that you're passionate. We'll take that as a given. Just tell us something more interesting about your subject than merely that you're passionate about it.
I'm just trying to think, it's all good advice. I'm just trying to think of a time when I've said the sentence, not just in general, I'm really passionate about this.
You see it a lot, honestly, a lot in personal statements.
Personal statements.
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean in I guess the reasons why I wouldn't in day-to-day life is the same reasons why you wouldn't in a personal statement, because you wouldn't say, I'm really passionate about this, unless you were then going to explain why you couldn't.
Yeah, in and of itself, it's not a particularly illuminating statement, because it's, why are you so passionate about that? And then you get to a proper discussion, right?
Exactly. And I get the reason why you shouldn't just say you're passionate about something is because we want to know why. And I guess to me, that comes across really clearly in a conversation. If we're having a conversation, I said, I'm really passionate about playing the piano, and then just left it there, you would
great.
Well, you would want to know why, what about the piano,
exactly.
How often,
how did you come across that interest? What steps have you taken to sort of deepen your understanding of the piano repertoire, whatever? Yeah. So all of that is the interesting stuff, and the simple statement, I'm really passionate about it. I mean, great, that's wonderful, but it's the beginning of a more interesting conversation.
Exactly. And we do have a full-length episode on the personal statements. If that's not already come out, you should definitely check it out, because we really go into all of the different subtleties of it, and supercurricular activities, what we're looking for personal statements, etc. So the next thing, I guess one of the infamous parts of the admissions process for both Oxford and Cambridge is the interviews. And we have a question here: what makes a good interview?
Yeah, I mean, that varies a lot from subject to subject. I mean, a good maths interview is very different to, say, a good English interview. But broadly speaking, I would say a good interview normally occurs when the person being interviewed thinks really carefully about the questions that they're being asked, whether they're maths-based questions or whether they're literature-based questions or anything in between. And just really takes time to think about the subtleties, perhaps, that are inherent in the questions that they've been asked. There might be something where it's if you don't think about it very deeply, you just immediately respond in a particular way. Whereas if you just take a moment, think it through, reflect upon it, you'd actually respond in a different way that would take you much closer to a really insightful answer or solution or kind of theory or whatever it may be. So I think, the best interviews are the ones where the applicants really have the courage and the confidence to think during the interview. And I appreciate that's tricky because it's always going to be a bit of a stressful situation. But yeah, the applicants who can do that tend to be the ones who sort of really impress us most, I would say.
And the interviewers, they're not trying to trick you, are they? Like the interviewers really want the interview to go well, and they really want you to engage with the conversation, and so like they're very much on your side. 100%.
I mean, I've interviewed for many years, and still today, you know, when I'm interviewing anyone, you know, the interview starts, and I mean, I'm being very professional on the outside, and I'm you know, saying, you know, explaining what we're going to do, and I'm doing all that stuff. But on the inside, I'm sort of thinking, come on, you know, you can do this, come on. Yeah. And I'm absolutely like a supporter of theirs, you know, internally. I can't say that externally, but that's what's sort of going on in my mind. And I'm certainly not sitting there thinking, I want you to mess this up, and I'm going to try and force you to mess this up. Yeah. I'm not thinking of it in that way. I'm certainly planning to ask some, hopefully, you know, difficult but interesting and intriguing and engaging questions, and I'm interested to see how they respond to them. But I'm not sort of wishing them to fail in it. I want them to do well, and I'll try and help them to do well as much as I can during the interview. Because I think you're right. I think often people think that the interviewers are like the opposition or something, and they're not. They're kind of on your side in I guess a slightly weird way, but they do want all the people they interview to do as well as possible during the interview, no question. That doesn't mean to say they won't occasionally play devil's advocate. You know, they will ask some provocative questions and maybe questions from unexpected angles, but that's all just to try and explore how someone thinks and functions in that kind of situation. So it's never malicious at all. Yeah,
and the interviews in particular is something we can talk more about in the future, do a podcast on. I remember one thing you mentioned in the past is that like some applicants, they should like trust their gut a bit more and kind of not be dogmatic, but kind of stick to like their intuitions, because I think sometimes an applicant in an interview, they feel so nervous and they feel so inferior to the interviewers that if the interviewers just suddenly play devil's advocate, the applicant feels like, oh, I must have been wrong. And they're obviously right. In those, you know, you don't want to never change your mind on an opinion if the interviewer is trying to explain you might have made a mistake. But similarly, you don't want to just abandon your opinions.
Completely that. Yeah. I mean, you know, as I said, what we're looking for are people who have the sort of courage to think during the interview, genuinely think and assess ideas. And I think the two extreme ways of not really thinking at all, one is to be completely dogmatic and bigoted and just say, no, the last thing I said was 100% correct. The last thing I said was 100% correct. No, it was 100% correct. You know, I'm not thinking, I'm just asserting, and that's just kind of boring and kind of brainless. Yeah. And at the other end of the spectrum, someone who just says, oh no, you're right. Oh no, you're absolutely right. Oh no, you're absolutely right. And just gives way all the time. That also doesn't really involve any thinking. So those two completely opposite types of response don't involve any thinking. Anything in the middle does. So it might be that there's a time to say, no, I'm sticking with what I said for these reasons. Yeah, exactly. But there might also be a time to say, actually, that's a good point. I hadn't considered that. You're right. It's more complicated. So let me rethink now what I said and let me change it. Right. That's where all the real intellectual work is being done, somewhere in that slightly confusing middle zone. Just the bigoted thing and the constantly giving way thing. They're just two different ways of not really thinking.
Because I guess the dream for the interviewers, or like for when we're trying to choose students, is someone who has an open mind but are confident enough to act and think through their own like opinions.
Yeah. Exactly. And if you manage to do that in the interview, you'll impress the interviewers, no question, because that's tricky to do in a sort of half an hour period when you're a bit stressed. So if you manage to do that or something close to it, you'll leave the interview and the interviewers will be going, yes.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And people often say that the interviews they kind of replicate supervisions, and I was wondering if you could expand on that.
Yeah, so the supervisions that we offer, again, I think we've got another podcast on this where we look at different forms of teaching in Cambridge, but the supervisions, it's a form of small group teaching. There's usually one supervisor or one teacher, if you like, and maybe 2 students, and the students will have prepared some work in advance of that supervision, and then they discuss it in detail during it. So an interview can't be exactly like that, but it does replicate that kind of teaching format. And I think it's always better to think of the interviews as being a teaching and learning experience rather than anything like a sort of an interrogation or something like that. During the interview, you will probably learn something, and almost certainly during the interview, the interviewers will teach you a little bit. And that's exactly what happens in supervisions, every single week during term time when someone's a student at Cambridge. So, if it helps to think of the interviews in that kind of way, if it takes maybe some of the pressure off it a little bit, because, if it's a genuine learning environment in the interview, like any learning environment, you don't expect someone to get everything 100% right all the time, because if they can do that, they're not really learning anything. They already know it. Whereas if we're ever in a situation where we're learning something, we might suspect that this is the case, but we're not entirely sure, and then we try and explain why we think that. So there's a lot of thinking that takes place when we're genuinely learning something, and that's what the interviews try to sort of recreate to an extent. But I think that is often a better way of thinking about them, rather than I'm just going to be grilled, it's going to be interrogated for half an hour, because it's nothing like an interrogation.
No, not at all. And I think for successful supervision or successful teaching and learning communication to happen, that the student needs to be able to think out loud, and not just, because there's also a temptation to, when you're unsure, to just not say anything and just do all the thinking in your head. But then the interviewer doesn't know what your thought processes are
and can't help you, because it might be that you're thinking something that's really insightful, but you just need a hint to get it fully on track. But if it's all done in silence, I mean, the interviewers are talented people, but they don't have a capacity for telepathy, so you have to share your workings, your internal mental workings with them, and then they can help.
Yeah, and it's fine when you're doing that if you make mistakes or say something that you think is silly. It's through making those, through like communicating what's on your mind, that the interviewer can help you and that you can build something off. Whereas to not communicate anything is really a dead end.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we have here, what things should I definitely not do at an interview?
I think the 2 things we've already mentioned are good things to try and avoid doing. So the sort of, just kind of brainless, repeated asserting of the same thing without listening to what the interviewers are saying. I'd avoid doing that if possible. And I'd avoid just constantly giving way to every single thing the interviewers say in almost like an overly deferential manner. Oh, of course you're right. I agree. Because again, as I said, that doesn't really involve any thinking. So I'd avoid those things. I'd avoid trying to sort of take charge of the interview occasionally, not too frequently, but occasionally some interviewees start sort of asking the interviewers questions and trying to sort of take control of it. I kind of get why that might seem to be a good strategy, but it's a strategy that will be doomed to failure, because the interviewers are usually very experienced and they'll just sort of take control of the interview again. So don't try and do anything like that. I think that's usually unhelpful.
That sounds like a waste of time.
Pretty much, yeah. And the interviewers will guide you through the interview and let them do that. And that's how it's supposed to work. That's how the dynamic is supposed to work. But I think outside of those things, I don't think there are any, big things that you shouldn't do. Maybe try not to swear too much. That's probably good advice in the interviews.
I mean, if swearing is how one communicates, we should be open to it.
Yeah, within limits. Limits. I mean, I wouldn't swear at the interviewers. Maybe that might be too far. But I think there's very little that's like 100% off limits in an interview.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Exactly. I guess the thing about trying to take control of the interview and asking the interviewer questions, I guess it really depends on where the intentions are coming from. Because I've always been for asking questions for clarification.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine, of course. Yeah, just saying, but sorry, I didn't understand that. Can you explain it again? That's absolutely fine. And
you can't, questions of clarification actually really show everything that they have understood, and they're saying specifically that this one thing that they haven't understood, which is why they're asking. So it's a really good way of showing the interviewer where you're at and what kind of things you have understood. There are insightful questions that you can show that you're having. Exactly.
Whereas the sorts of questions that sometimes you're asked as an interviewer that can be just a bit annoying. If I've asked some, I don't know, subtle and intricate question about some aspect of quantum dynamics because the person's interested in quantum dynamics, if they then say, I don't know, what do you think? It's like, well, I'm more interested in what you think. That's what we're doing here. So, that's not really a question for clarification. That's just I don't really know what to say. And so you throw it back on the interviewer. They'll just very gently throw it back on you. So you won't be able to avoid attempting some kind of answer.
Yeah, exactly. If it comes from a place like that, then I mean the interviews are short. You want to make the most of them.
Yep.
You don't want to waste any time.
Exactly.
In these kind of power battles, I guess.
Yep.
I guess this won't take too long. The last question on interviews: what should I wear for an interview?
Really doesn't matter. I mean, I would say basically wear something either that makes you feel sort of relaxed so that you're able to be as kind of chilled as possible during the interview. But then if you're the sort of person who if you get too relaxed, you don't think so clearly, then wear something that's a little bit more formal, just so that you're in the zone. So, some people, when they're really relaxed, they're in the zone. Some people, when they're a little bit more wearing the kind of stuff they'd wear to go into their sixth form or whatever, they're a bit more in the zone. So wear whatever you need to wear to remind you that this is something that you need to take seriously without getting overly stressed about it. And so wear whatever you personally need to wear to put you in that kind of mental space. And that'll be different for different people. But we're not assessing what people wear. I mean, as I'm sure I'm already demonstrating on these podcasts, again, academics know lots of stuff about lots of things. We're not internationally renowned for our fashion sense, So the thought that we're maybe judging you based on what you wear and assessing you, like scoring you out of 10 on what you're wearing, I mean, that would just be absolutely risible because most academics, that's the one thing they know virtually nothing about, with a few exceptions. We're not assessing you based on what you wear. We don't care.
Yeah, definitely wear what you're comfortable with. I think I wore shirt and trousers just to feel a bit formal.
Yep.
And then never again.
That was it.
That was
the one and only time.
The one and only time.
Yeah.
So if they chose me based on that,
you let them down. Where's the shirt?
It was a full tracksuit. I mean, it doesn't look like it from what I'm wearing. This is what post uni work does to you.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
It's a slippery slope. No, more that I need to wear a shirt rather than the slippery slope. But no, I was a full tracksuit guy at uni, which I thought I knew that the interviewers won't care what I'm wearing, but if I wore my full tracksuit personally, I would be so self-conscious about it that I was like, just put on some formal clothes.
Exactly.
No one's going to.
That's why it's important you wear what you need to wear to get you in the right
Exactly.
space, and the interviewers don't care, but
Yeah.
you should care, because
exactly.
it enables you to perform as well as you can in the interview.
Because then it was just, I mean, it wasn't formal. It was just like a shirt like this and some like black trousers from wherever, Primark or H&M.
Yeah.
And then once I knew, okay, no one can have a negative opinion about this, I can just focus on the interview.
Exactly. The stuff that really matters.
Yeah, that the interview wasn't going to be my opportunity to fight about what the traditional norms of fashion.
There are other forums for that.
This is not the time. Yeah, exactly. At least for me, but by all means, if just wear whatever you feel comfortable in. I know people who've gone in their pajamas, and absolutely why not?
It's not a problem. It's not a problem.
Exactly. So Cambridge have these mysterious things called pools.
Yeah.
And there's several of them, which you might not have known. Because I didn't know before I started working here. So can you explain to us what are the pools and what the winter pool is, firstly?
Yeah, so the winter pool is really the biggest of all the pools. Basically, anything that's kind of called a pool as part of the Cambridge admissions process, it's really one of our redistribution mechanisms. So what we want to try and make sure is that the applicants with the greatest ability and potential receive the offers, regardless of which college they've applied to. And so the winter pool, as its name suggests, takes place in the winter. It takes place after all the interviews have happened, and they normally take place in the first couple of weeks of December. So the winter pool normally takes place in kind of early January. And I always think it's better to give a sort of concrete example rather than describe it from a high level, because it always sounds really complex from a high level, but relatively straightforward if you just give a concrete example. So let's say at this college, at Trinity Hall, let's say for a subject like history, let's say after assessing all the applications we'd received that year and having assessed all the interviews and all of that stuff, we decide perhaps that we've had a really strong year of applicants, and maybe we have 8 applicants who we think really merit a place at Cambridge. But for internal logistical reasons, number of bedrooms, things like that, we can only make 6 offers in a given year for history. What we would try to do is rank order those applicants as best we could based on all the information that we have. We would offer to the top 6, and the remaining 2 out of the 8 who we thought were really strong, we would place in the winter pool, which means we make all their paperwork available to our colleagues at all the other colleges. And if there's a college that's had a weaker set of applicants than we've had, then they may well choose to offer to one of the people who applied to us and who was placed in the pool, rather than make an offer to someone who'd applied to them directly. And about a quarter of all the applicants who receive an offer from Cambridge receive it through the winter pool. So, they might have applied to College X, but they eventually receive an offer from College Y as a result of having been redistributed. So broadly speaking, that's what it is and how it works, and that's why it exists. And it helps in situations where one college is just swamped with really strong applicants in a given year, whereas maybe another college had weaker applicants. So we just redistribute so that the people who really deserve the offers still get the offers.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely great. It's having this database of all the applicants that all the colleges can see, because college choice, there's always a worry of, if I choose a college that looks really pretty or is really big or is really famous, what if I'm more likely to go in if I go to a different college that might have less applicants? But all of that kind of stuff really goes out the window when you discover the pools and realise that all of the colleges can see all of the applicants and make sure that the best students, the students that deserve an offer, will receive an offer. I don't think, at least Oxford don't have a pool. I've never worked in the admissions side in Oxford, so I'm unsure how they do it, but they do a thing with the interviews where when you're there interviewing, or in that week, you might subsequently be asked to interview at a different college at the time.
They sort of incorporate the redistribution into the assessment at the interview stage, so that there is a redistribution mechanism. It's just handled slightly differently.
Yeah. So whereas in Cambridge, once the interviews happen, the winter pool stage is a process that goes on for several weeks after the interviews, and then ends really in like mid-January. Or well, I mean, there's certain dates for certain deadlines, but it's a long process basically.
Yep.
And with a lot of time spent by directors of admissions from all of the colleges looking at the applicants and working out who to give offers to. Yep. So the last question that we have today, as we famously did not go through all the questions again, so we'll probably have to do a third part of the FAQs on admissions, which is good.
There's a lot to say.
There's a lot to say. And this is just a whistle-stop tour for most of these topics. We will be doing specific podcasts on each of these. So you just talked about the winter pool, but there's also the summer pool and the August Reconsideration pool. So can you explain to us what each of those are, please? Yeah,
exactly. So as I say, anything that's called a pool is basically a kind of redistribution mechanism. The summer pool, as the name suggests, takes place in the summer. That takes place in August. Very soon after the school exam results, and particularly the A-level results, have been communicated. We get some of the other school exam results a bit before then, but the A-level results is the sort of last sort of batch of results that we get, and obviously it's quite a large batch of results. And the summer pool exists because sometimes someone has applied to a particular college and they've received an offer from that college, so they've become an offer holder. And in some cases, their offer may have been slightly above the standard conditional offer. So it might be on the science side, they had a 3A star offer, or it might be on the arts and humanities side, they had a 2A star offer. And there are various reasons why colleges might decide in some circumstances to make an offer that's above the standard level. But obviously, if someone just misses that offer, so if they've had, say, a 3A star offer, but they ended up with 2A stars and an A, they've missed the offer for the college that made them the offer, but they've met the standard offer that many of the other colleges would have been perfectly happy with. So the summer pool exists to give colleges a chance to make additional offers to people who perhaps had offers at other colleges and who just missed them. So, you might have had your offer from College X, and at College Y, I might think, well, actually, I'm perfectly happy with the A-level results that individual has achieved. Therefore, I'm willing to make them an offer even at that late stage in the summer, in August, for my college. So again, it's a type of redistribution mechanism. It's a bit different to the winter pool. It's smaller because the majority of the offer holders do meet their offer conditions. But it's just, again, a method to make sure that applicants with really good ability and potential end up with an offer, even if they just missed the offer that they were originally given. So that's the summer pool.
And just on that, before we go on to the August Reconsideration pool, because I imagine some viewers, they might have alarm bells when they hear that sometimes colleges might give a 3A star offer, but and that's when they give an offer that's higher than the one that's shown on the entry requirements shown on the university website. But I think Trinity Hall, they're very unlikely to do that. We are very unlikely to do that here, right?
Yeah. We tend not to make raised offers at this college. What we sometimes do is specify that the A star or one of the A stars in the science side has to be in a particular subject, or maybe like two of the A levels, we want to see the A star coming from those two rather than the third, for whatever reason. There are normally reasons for that. It may be that if we do something like that, the two subjects we identify are just really important for the course. So we sort of restrict the range in which the A star or the two A stars can can be achieved in, if you like, the range of subjects it can be achieved in. But as I say, colleges are free basically to make whatever offers they want. The vast majority stick to the standard conditional offers the majority of the time, but there are certain circumstances in which a particular college might make a kind of raised offer or might specify the A star being in a particular subject. And that's what the summer pool helps to sort of iron out and as I say, redistribute. So someone ends up at a college that's fully happy with their academic performance, even if their original college isn't quite happy with it. That's fine. Different colleges look at things in slightly different ways.
Exactly. And the August Reconsideration pool?
Yeah, that's a relatively new addition to the pools. It's been running for a few years, but the others, the winter pool and the summer pool, have been running for a long time, for decades really. The August Reconsideration pool exists for people who applied to us that admissions round, so they submitted their application in October the 15th, and we assessed them, and we assessed them fully, so we interviewed them and everything, and they were rejected at that stage, but they subsequently go on to at least meet the standard conditional offer for the subject they've applied for. And in many cases, they actually exceed the standard conditional offer. So, on the arts and humanities side, they might end up with 2 A stars and an A, and on the science side, they might end up with 3 A stars. And so if they fall into that category, and if in addition they have certain contextual flags, as we call them, so for instance, if they're on free school meals or something like that, it means that we can reconsider them again in August if they choose to let us do that. So they're told that they're eligible for that August reconsideration pool, and if they choose to allow their paperwork to be placed into that pool, we can then consider them, and we can choose to make offers to them even at that late stage, and even though they didn't originally receive an offer in January. So it's a way of really, giving applicants a second chance, but also giving ourselves a second chance, because it may have been that for one reason or another, we didn't make the best decision in January for some of those applicants, whereas in August we can then make a really good decision that recognises that their capacity to come and flourish on the courses that we offer here.
Yeah, I think that's so cool and really good of the university to have a system in place where if for students that we weren't to have given an offer, but then to go on to get the entry requirement grades, we reconsider the application. I think that's really good. And it's a really good incentive for students to keep going to try to achieve the top grades for entry requirements that might not be for their university. So it's quite similar to what I did in the end. So I applied for Oxford, didn't get in, and I did maths and further maths. So I'd already had 1 A star from my first year, and my offer to Bath was A star AB. So I had 2 remaining A levels, chemistry and further maths. I could just get AB. On the back of my mind, I kind of thought that I might want to reapply to Oxford. So I really went for the A star, A, the 3 A stars if possible. And which, there was no pressure. Whereas something like the August Reconsideration pool, if I knew that existed for Oxford, that would have been a really good incentive for me to keep going. Because if I get the grades, I might be reconsidered. And it's a really good reason for why someone should keep going, even if their first university offer is lower, like it was in my case. But I ended up getting the grades, 2 A stars and A, and then decided to reapply. And it would have been really easy. I think at the time a lot of my friends were thinking, how come you're studying so much? Your offer is so low. But it worked out in the long run.
Absolutely. And as I say, the eligibility criteria to be considered in the August Reconsideration pool, all the details about that are on the relevant webpage. So if people just, Google Cambridge and August Reconsideration pool, they'll see which criteria you have to meet in order to be eligible. But all the information's out there. But as I say, because it's a relatively recent part of the process. There are often teachers who don't know that it exists, so they're not able to sort of advise their students, initially. Whereas if they just read through those web pages, they'll be really well informed to be able to advise their students accordingly.
Yeah, there's so much information online. I think
too much information in some ways.
I think kind of applying to Cambridge, applying to Oxford, really gets you prepared for when you're applying for a job and you have to kind of like read everything about the institution and know it inside out. You know, if you've done the application process for Cambridge, you're like, oh, well, it's just like that.
Exactly. It's good to be thorough.
Because, you do, and you do have to. Sadly, you can't kind of wing the admissions. There's too many deadlines. That you'll probably miss.
You can't only do last minute cramming. You have to think about it carefully and plan a bit. Yeah, because you have to know when to do the last minute, and there are like several. The MyCap in particular. Get your MyCaps in. Yeah, absolutely.
Because if you don't get your My Cambridge application,
I guess we'll do a podcast on My Cambridge application on the MyCap.
But it's a common hurdle where people then aren't subsequently reconsidered, aren't considered because they haven't handed it in. And we'll do a podcast on that if we didn't mention it in the personal statement one. So we do have more questions, but we're out of time, and we've both got somewhere to be. So so we'll be
to be continued.
To be continued. We'll do a third episode on frequently asked questions on admissions. But thank you for joining. I'm Siam, the Outreach Communications Officer, with Marcus, our Director of Admissions. Thank you for listening, whether it's on your pod, wherever you get your podcasts, or on YouTube. We'll see you guys next time.
Good. I'm just about on time, I guess.